Welcome back to Jewel the Beetle Reads, Chapter 13 of The Walking Dead Hope. I'm Jewel the Beetle. Let's continue where we left off, shall we? Javier swallowed before answering. I am verily certain she is, yes, he assured the young man, and we're going to get her back, Louis. We're so close here, Louis mused, stretching his hand in the direction of the wall, pretending to grasp it. I wish I could just barge in there and take her back. That would just get you taken, or worse, killed, Javi countered. He packed their things into the backpack, and the two of them resumed their walk north. Tonight, we get her back. I hope you're right. They were walking for barely 20 minutes when they ran into what looked to be a ramshackle shack of sorts, about 500 meters from the right arm's walls. It was 2 stories high, topped with a crow's nest that looked to be recently built. The 2 men looked at each other and nodded. We should be able to get a look. Maybe we should be able to get a good look from here, don't you think? Louis said. Perhaps, Javi hesitated, looking up at the wooden structure. Gabe, we found a small shack and we're inspecting it. If I don't check back in 30 minutes, assume the worst. Copy that, Gabe's voice sounded through the walkie-talkie. As Louis took a few steps toward the shack, Javi stuck out an arm in front of the man. Wait, what if someone's in there already? Easy, Louis said with a shrug. We kill him. Without another word, Louis unsheathed his knife and tried to lock on the makeshift door. Fortunately for them, it was open. Once inside, Javi covered Louis's back while the latter looked around. The downstairs room was dark and grimy. It contained a wooden table flanked by 2 lawn chairs. On the table was a stack of cards and a small walkie-talkie. Their footsteps creaked on the wooden floor as Louis approached the table. He took the walkie-talkie in his hands and turned it. With the flick of a switch, it was off. He looked back at Javi, placing a finger to his lips. The older man nodded, and they continued their tour of the small shack. Deeming the bottom floor devoid of anything else of importance, Louis slowly crept up the staircase. Javi standing sentry at the door. He cringed when the wooden boards creaked under his weight, but pressed on nonetheless. After the final step, things went quiet. Spider webs covered a great portion of the dimly lit room. A door to the makeshift balcony of the crow's nest stood ajar on the other side of the staircase. Before he could inspect the outside further, he caught a flash of silver from the shadows to his left. A blade slashed at his arm, cutting through the fabric of his coat and making contact with his skin. He recoiled, his left hand putting pressure on his bloody shoulder. Oh, sorry about that. And his right one gripping his knife. The man stood before him, brandishing a hunting knife of his own. He looked to be a few years older than Louis, with blonde hair to complement his trimmed beard. Louis noticed that he had a scorch mark protruding from beneath his shirt. Before he could inspect the young man further, the latter slashed once more. Louis recoiled backward, almost losing his balance. Almost a deadly blade to his left. Avoiding the deadly blade to his left, he lunged forward with his own knife, making contact with the blonde's forearm. They barely grunted as the small Mexican standoff began, circling each other menacingly. Louis attempted another lunge, missing the mark and causing himself to misstep. The man took the opportunity and held Louis in a tight chokehold. Ah! He yelled, his right arm flailing his knife around. The man slapped the blade from his hands, pressing harder on Louis's neck. What are you doing here, boy? The man exclaimed. Before Louis started losing consciousness, a loud metallic thud rang through the room. And Javi's bat made contact with the blonde's back. Louis found himself released from the chokehold, rubbing his neck furiously. Faced against 2 opponents, the man slashed at Javi's first, who dove backwards. As he overshot his lunge, Louis managed a well-placed punch to his temple, followed by yet another swing of Javi's bat. As the man fell to the floor, Javi and Louis pulled him to his feet and down the stairs, shoving him onto one of the chairs. Barely conscious, the The blonde attempted to grab for the walkie-talkie on the table, but Louis beat him to the punch. He smashed the device on the ground, towering over the man on the chair. "You're not going anywhere, boy," he spat, crossing his arms. "Look, just let me go, please," the man pleaded, fear in his eyes. "I won't say anything." "We'll let you go if you answer some questions," Louis conceded, pacing slowly in front of the man. Javi stood to his side, his eyes trained on Louis. Something inside the freckled man had snapped. He was looking at him with a mixture of awe and concern. "Do you know of a woman that was taken by your group a few days ago?" Louis asked. When the man gave no answer, Louis slammed his fist on the table, startling him. "Answer me, darn it!" All right, the blond man said, raising his hands. "There's a woman in one of the holding cells. Meyer said something about her being part of our group before," he explained. Louis looked at Javi in confusion, and the older man shrugged. "Must mean the new frontier," he guessed. "That brand on her arm, right?" Louis asked. He'd seen that mark a million times. He would always trace it gently when they were lying in bed together, curious about its origin. Once she had told him the reason that brand was there, he wasn't as fond of it. "Right. All right," Louis said, nodding. He turned to the man on the chair, a scowl clouding his freckled features. "Where are they keeping her?" I, the man stuttered, seemingly shrinking in on himself. Scoffing, Louis took out his handgun and trained a barrel on the man's forehead. "Tell me where she is, right now." Javi stepped forward, placing a hand on Louis's shoulder, but the latter shook him off. "It's a large brown building on the western side of the compound, a few yards from the wall," the man blabbered, his eyes trained on the gun, and his features contorted in fear. "How many guards?" "3. There's not much security on the holding cells." The man's voice was breaking at that point, making him sound younger than he was. "Keys? A large man with a thick beard has them at all times," he whimpered. "He's on guard tonight. Please don't kill me," he pleaded, his eyes glistening over. Louis removed the gun from the man's forehead, taking a short step backwards. He looked at the man. He looked of disgust, every present of his face. This man may not have taken Clem, but he is accomplice. But he's an accomplice. He cleared his throat, nodding at Javi. "What is your name, man?" he asked. My name?" "Yes, that word your parents called you as a kid?" Louis snapped, rolling his eyes. "Miles," he said, nodded slowly. "Miles Campbell." "Well, Miles Campbell," said Louis, turning the gun in his hands. "For what it's worth, thank you for the information." And this is where I will stop for part 2. Stay tuned for part 3 of Jewel the Beetle reads Chapter 13 of The Walking Dead Hope.